Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Mindfulness, a Key Factor in Leadership Development by Prem Selver. This is one in a series of webinars that we provide throughout the year for free to the project management and general management communities as part of our give back as Procept Associates. Let me tell you a little bit about Prem. Prem's experience includes being a successful leader for a growing mid-sized company where he trained other leaders, and during this time he noticed that no matter what skills he trained in others, there was still something missing. There was still some part of an effective leader that could not be captured in training manuals. While developing his MBA thesis, he discovered that his long-term meditation had impacted who he was as a leader. His sense of purpose, values, and both emotional and mental awareness made him more effective. Combined with his years of experience training leaders, his personal leadership experience, and his research into leadership theory during his MBA, Prem has developed a unique perspective on meditation and its benefits for leaders. He has been teaching mindfulness meditation for several years and has practiced mindfulness for 16 years, applying the practice to his everyday working life. Prem's interests lie in leadership development, employee empowerment, and performance management. He's an advocate for self-development and personal transformation and specializes in the practical application of meditation tools in the work environment. He looks to apply his knowledge to help all people find peace, happiness, and purpose. So today the webinar will be hosted by Prem Selver. I'm excited to see what he has to say. Everyone, we're going to be conducting the webinar. Should run about 45 plus minutes of presentation materials, and then we'll take question and answer at the end. So you have two options: either remember your questions until the end and you'll be given instructions at that time, or if you've logged in through the web interface, you'll see on the screen a questions window. You can type your questions in there to hold them until the end, and then I will read out the questions and Prem will respond. So you can type them in there as they occur to you during the presentation. And with no further ado, Prem, it's all yours.
Great. Thanks so much, Kevin. I appreciate that. That was fantastic. And thanks so much, Procept. Thanks so much for joining, everybody. I appreciate that very much. It's very great to have you here today. So I'll be talking about mindfulness and how it affects leadership development and its benefits. So I'm just going to bust right into it. There we go. So if you do me a favor, just bear with me as we start the presentation here. Do me a favor, and I want you to count how many dots you see. See how many blue dots versus how many red dots there are on the screen here. I'll give you a second. You don't need to respond. Just count them for me and tell me, or in your mind, say what they are. And I hope you were accurate. And okay, so now that I've got you to done that, do me a favor, take a breath into your belly and find an object in the room that you're in right now and just zero in on one object and try to look at that object fully. Put all of your awareness and your attention onto that one thing as you continue to breathe into your belly. Observe that thing fully, see its color, try to see it without any judgment or without any other ideas about it. Be open to it. Putting all your awareness and all of your focus on it. Now come on back, and again, count for me the differences, the different colors here. Count the blue and count the red dots. Now, I hope you were right. Again, in a workshop format, I would get responses. And so when you did it the second time, did you notice your clarity? Did you notice maybe you were a little bit more accurate? Had I timed you, maybe you would have been a little bit more faster. So this is what they're discovering now with mindfulness and meditation, is its ability to unlock unused potential in the leader and in the individual. So people think of meditation in three ways. They think of it as, one is sleeping. I used to have a coworker and she said, isn't it basically just like sleeping? Meditation is definitely not sleeping. Your body is in a deep state of relaxation, and your brain is in focused mode, focused and aware, and has very different effects on you than sleeping does. Number two, people think of it as calming, and that's accurate. It reduces blood pressure, it reduces anxiety. So those are facts, and that's definitely true as well too. But a lot of people don't think of meditation as empowering. It helps with rejuvenation of burnout. It increases social and emotional awareness. It helps with emotional and mental resilience and strength. It helps with insomnia. And all of these are great for leadership. So when I say here the leadership mind is the meditative mind, I'm basically saying if you take all the effective attributes of leadership and you take all the bits of meditation, there's a correlation. They go hand in hand together. So I'm the guy who basically hopes that, I'm a visionary this way, that in the future, and maybe hopefully around the corner, meditation will be a requirement in leadership. That next to have to build, on that job description, have to build teams, be willing to, make reports, and quote unquote be willing to meditate twice a day, because the benefits are that great. So as Kevin explained, my story starts training leaders, and it's where I fell in love with leadership, is helping other leaders and helping employees. I was a leader at the same time. And I ended up loving the experience of helping people kind of achieve a sense of themselves that was larger, and larger than they could perceive of themselves. And it was here that I recognized that there was a piece to leadership training that was missing. In this composition of a leader here, you can see the outside circle is like above average cognitive ability, motivation to lead, inner drive to pursue goals. That outside circle is the basics of leadership. You need those anyway. Those are required, hands down. Don't worry about it. That's what you have to have just to get there. But the middle circle, communication, ability to articulate a vision, delegation, coaching, you can teach those. But they now know that there is a further level there. Values, emotional and mental resilience, positivity, social and emotional awareness, creativity, that there's this deeper component to leadership, and that if you don't have these, then you actually miss out on the others. You don't have this inner depth, then you miss out on the ability to effectively train leadership. But the thing is, how do you train these things? How do you get a leader to be emotionally and mentally resilient? How do you get a leader to be positive? How do you get a leader to be more creative? So that's why I use meditation or show how meditation will benefit leadership. So there's this thing called the interpersonal limbic regulation. And basically, it's the idea that we are emotionally connected human beings. That, for example, if I take 10 of you right now and place you all into a boardroom, and in that boardroom, you spend 2 hours, and then you come out, and someone's there with a little board, and they ask you how you're feeling, and they take some measurements of you. It turns out you would all say you have similar emotions. It turns out you would all basically have similar hormones, and that you would have similar heartbeats. So we're wired in emotionally as people. We pick up each other's emotions. And in the leadership transaction, we give that emotional responsibility to the leader. They end up governing how we make meaning of emotions. Even if the leader is hiding behind closed doors, they're unavailable because they're some CEO, they still have a trickle-down effect in the memos that they write and in the leader, in the people who are close to that leader. Then that person trickles that down, and it ends up being a trickle-down effect from the very top. So that's very interesting, but take a look at this figure. Now, this comes from neuroscience. 95% of our feelings, thoughts, and learning is unconscious. So there's kind of a disconnect there. Think about how valuable the emotional content of a leader is, yet we live in this kind of unconscious world about our emotions and our thoughts and our feelings. In one study, 486 public companies and 7,000 professionals were looked at for self-awareness. 79% of the financially failing companies had leaders who measured poorly on self-awareness. So that is so large. Right now, you could go over to a business, business news and take a look at all the failing companies, and it's a 4 out of 5 chance that those failing companies have someone at the top who's emotionally low on self-awareness. So there's a disconnect here about that valuable component of the emotions in our trainings and our inability to sometimes emphasize that emotional connection. So let me show you how meditation is that key. So this here is a brain, obviously, and let me pull up the mouse. This piece here is your cognitive section. This is your cortex. This is where you remember phone numbers, and you remember the basic tasks you have to do in your daily life, how to operate your iPhone, right? And then this here's your emotional component. So this is your several emotional parts of your brain exist here. And this guy here is called your anterior cingulate. And this piece expands when you meditate. And it is the regulator between the cortex, how you think, and your emotions. And literally, this expands and you become more aware of your own emotions. You gain self-awareness from meditation. And an interesting thing happens when you gain awareness about your own emotions is that it flips as well, and you become aware of other people's emotions. So you become more compassionate, empathic. You have greater empathy. Another feature about the brain and meditation is that it increases dopamine, and dopamine is the feel-good chemical of the brain. A 65% increase in dopamine in one of the studies. And what that means is that you increase your positive thinking. And a funny thing happens in the brain is that the more positive thinking you have, the more you rewire the brain to resist negative thinking. It actually resists negative thinking the more positive you think. And this is what happens when a leader comes from compassion, empathy, and positivity. In the work environment, they create trust. Right? They build a bond of trust with the employee. There's higher job satisfaction. You get higher job commitment. And all of it is correlated to increased performance. This here is I just didn't kind of emphasize that point. This is Benjamin Schneider. He's from the University of Maryland here. And he has a really interesting research. He took a lot of service industries and service companies in several different industries. And he noticed a 1% increase in service climates. So how the employee feels about the work environment that they're in. And for every increase that occurred, there was a 2% increase in revenue. So you had this doubling up effect for how the employee felt is the doubling up of revenue came in. And so how people feel about working for a company can account for 20 to 30% of business performance. And another feature here of the brain, this guy here is the thalamus. So this is how you keep your identity. This is where the part of your brain where you are aware of your body and your outline of who you are and your identity. And when you meditate, it softens. And that's the experience that people get that they talk about in meditation of unity, the experience of kind of becoming one or having that unity experience. And it turns out that when your thalamus is weakened, you are a better performer. You perform tasks better. It's actually a mystery in the brain. They don't know why that's the case, but you perform tasks better. And this correlates to the flow in psychology. There's actually a book called The Flow. And this relates to the zone in sports, right? So they're very aware of this feature. And it turns out that, yes, meditators actually have increased performance. So this is a study done in 1977, and you have 126 office workers. basically doing administrative tasks. And over 8 weeks, they were told to meditate twice a day, 15 minutes every day. So that's what these guys are. These ones were told to sit quietly for 8 weeks, twice a day, 15 minutes a day. And same here. These guys were told to just relax, do whatever you do that's relaxing for you. Read a book, watch TV, whatever it is you consider relaxing. Do it twice a day, 15 minutes, 8 weeks. And the meditators had increased performance. And that same study, you still have that social component is there. The increase in how you interact with people. The meditators had increased social satisfaction. Interestingly enough, those who sat quietly also had increased social satisfaction, and those who just relaxed the way that they like to relax also did. But the meditators had the most gain out of that social satisfaction. I like this one as well too. This is teachers and burnout. And leaders can understand burnout very well. Emotional, minus 27% emotional exhaustion. And there's, again, that social component, right? 78% ability to connect, 51% reduction of anxiety. This was 91 participants, 45 meditators, and 46 in a control group, and over 3 states and a wide range of ages. So lastly, the idea that compassion and positivity and focus, and I'm talking in a way that says you do meditation and these things happen in the brain and you become kind of this new person. And it's not really what's going on. Meditation relaxes what's called cognitive rigidity in your brain. So it allows you to change mental states. And it allows you to express your deeper desires, right? Compassion isn't something that happens to your brain and then you're more compassionate. You have this innate desire for compassion, and by meditating, it releases the inhibitions you have, and then you try to figure out or understand how to express yourself in that way. And so fundamentally, it's about authenticity, about your kind of deeper self that kind of comes out in the transaction of meditation. And this is about revealing the more conscious self underneath the unconscious self. So there was a very large, the largest scale studies of leadership. One was done over a 30-year period and had several thousand subjects. Authenticity and integrity was the key component for what people look for in leadership. Another was done 15,000 middle managers from 60 cultures, 700 organizations, found that authenticity was what they were looking for in their leader. So it's a huge attribute in leadership. It's a very powerful attribute in leadership. And meditation works with authenticity. So I hope I sold you a little bit. I hope I've piqued your interest, and that I'm saying something that might resonate with you, that there is some kind of validity here about the connection between leadership and meditation. So what I want to talk about and spend some time now with is making it clear what it could look like for you as a leader to embrace mindfulness and meditation. What am I talking about really? Right? I'm throwing out some good words: compassion, right? Empathy, mindfulness, meditation. But what is this really talking about? And so I'm going to go into a bit of detail here about what the merging of the idea of embracing mindfulness, mindful living, and meditation in the work environment. So I wanted to spell a couple myths though first. What am I talking about, and what am I not talking about? What I'm not talking about is an esoteric practice. I want to make that crystal clear. I'm not talking about bringing in some type of religion or esoteric practice. Meditation at its core is just a practice of breath, awareness, and focus. At its core, that's all it is. And that's what we're talking about here. We're bearing everything down and taking what's useful for us. We're not talking about embracing anything large or anything that's esoteric by nature, right? And number two, especially for leadership, it's not about being soft. So as I mentioned, I was in an organization and I used to meditate. I meditated for about 9 years when I was a leader in the organization. I was meditating for 9 years up to that point. And I had to terminate a lot of people. And it's not about being compassionate in the sense that I'm feeling, you know what, I don't want to fire this person. That would just be too hard on them. You know, it wasn't about that ever. It wasn't about some idea that I had that I was too soft. The compassion was the trust. So they already had a sense of trust in me, and I already had it, and they knew that I was doing everything I could to make them succeed. And when it didn't work, it just didn't work for some people. This job wasn't for everybody. And we had an open, engaged conversation about that. And I was also compassionate to how they felt about underperforming. No one likes to underperform. And so we had open conversations about that. And so there was a sense of trust. So when I had to terminate people, literally some of them would come back and thank me that I finally got them out so they could find a job that really worked for them. And but I rarely ever had anyone blow up on me where it became emotional and heated and heavy. Right? It never went in that direction. It was a sense of compassion was my firmness as a leader existed, but the compassion was how I related to them and how I worked with them and the trust that we had with each other, that I had done everything in my power as a leader to help them. And it kind of ended like that. There was nothing else if this job didn't work for them. So by no means, just to emphasize, especially with leadership, it's not about being soft, right? So then what is it about then? So first, it's about being open. Be open to the idea that the next step of your leadership development is inside. It's within you. That your resources to grow are internal, are inside you. But when it comes to authenticity and compassion and empathy, these values or attitudes, they can become new focuses. The real challenge that meditation helps with is how you handle your complex emotions, like fear, risk, like when you're nervous to take a chance. That happens with leadership quite a bit. Maybe envy or jealousy in the workplace. There's a lot of research that shows how you handle your complex emotions matters to your team. Remember when I mentioned that leaders interpret emotional meaning of events for employees? When dealing with complex emotions, authenticity and in a transparent manner, it builds trust with your employee. So, and remember when I talked about trust, it leads to higher performance. It's pretty wild, eh? Our emotions, that connection can lead to better performance, right? Pretty neat how that works. And it's working with that flow, and it's living in an authentic space, but still remaining firm when that firmness is required. So I just want to make this clear, right? If you had a tool that helped your employees perform better, wouldn't you not want to cultivate it and perfect it? So, and I can think of some scenarios where there's resistance to an idea of being authentic in leadership, especially when it comes to emotions and emotional transactions. Because there's a hitch. Leaders ride the wave of their role by being confident. So what I invite you to do is to be confident in compassion. Think of confidence and think of compassion at the same time. Not just compassion for your team, but also for yourself. How else does leadership help? So this guy here, this guy's trying really hard to embrace. This guy here is trying really hard to embrace this guy. So this guy, let's create a little scenario here. This guy is your employee. And he's a high performer, but he doesn't get along well with anybody else. Just a clash of personalities. No disputes are created. He's just an oddball. And here you are, the leader. If you're a woman listening, you're a woman in this scenario. But you've got to do your best to connect with this guy. So it turns out with meditation, remember I've talked about the anterior cingulate, the part of the brain that expands when you meditate. It allows you to deal with people who are different from yourself. It lowers the inner guard that keeps us from relating to people that hold different beliefs than our own. Now, if you study team building, right? It's quintessential team building physics. Teams are more productive when the personalities that form it are different. The opposite of this is leading by personality, forming a personality culture where the leader hires and promotes people like himself. And just on a personal level, all the training I ever done and all the, being an employee for work environments, I have rarely ever seen a leader that doesn't lead by personality to some degree. They become friends with those that they connect with, and then when there's someone that they're not connecting with, it becomes obvious in the work culture. I've seen the best leaders, nice guys, great motivators, but it was obvious when there was some kind of disconnect. And that's all it takes. Lack of trust is created, unengagement begins, and when it grows, you have this festering negative personality in the culture, and if that person is powerful enough, then they dominate the culture, and all things I've seen in many different types of work scenarios, right? It's kind of a repeat process that can occur. And so I talked earlier about empathy and compassion. And so in this case, empathy and compassion are picking up the cues in the culture that your behavior is being watched. I sometimes think this is the kind of missing point, right? That your behavior gets watched as a leader. Your employees are looking for how fair you are in your behavior, right? In your treatment of each employee. And they look for that authenticity in that interaction. Is it clear here how meditation is the connection that helps with this? Right? Empathy, compassion, bridging people in your work environment. Even myself, when I actually was building teams, I made sure I just chose the better performers, and sometimes they were oddballs. And it's almost my favorite feats that I turned my oddball people into either great leaders themselves, and they ended up surpassing other people because they were just a bit quirky. And when you have that dynamic in a team where different personalities add different types of flavors or different perspectives, it makes teams really effective and efficient. So another way here, how this looks in a work environment, how this looks, meditation, mindfulness, how this comes off in the work environment, especially for us as the leaders. So I was looking at this picture actually the other day, and this is kind of like the scenario of stress, right? Stress is building up here. And I'm just going to throw out a weird analogy here, but it kind of feels like it relates. We spend our entire lives being this pipe. We're the pipe. And our face is facing inside the pipe. So we can see all the stress, all the pressure building. We face our lives facing inwards. And we simply forget that there's a knob. And so, but that's what meditation does. It kind of reminds us that there's actually a knob that we can turn that can reduce the pressure and the stress. So what happens in our nervous system when there's pressure and stress, right? A lot of people are familiar with the fight or flight. We release hormones, our heartbeat increases, blood flows to our limbs. The problem isn't that we have stress. It's about how we handle the stress, right? Organisms need stress. It's very normal in nature, and we hear about this quite a bit if you read about stress, that stress is natural and is required. The detrimental part to stress is the remuneration of what we're stressed out about. The manager's coming, the district manager's coming to our department, and my department's a sham and I don't get along well with the district manager. Oh God, he's coming, I can't. I'm stressing out. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And the first thought happens, and there's the thought, and the stress exists. That's fine. But it's the recurring thought that creates the damage. Every time you have that recurring stress, you're recreating those hormones. You're re-releasing those hormones. The blood flow continues and the heartbeat continues to accelerate, right? And a breakdown occurs when that remuneration occurs consistently and constantly, and our body can't handle it anymore. And I was just reading a report. 10 million work hours were lost last year in the UK because of stress. Now, what I tell you is it's not because of stress, but how we handled the stress. 10 million work hours were lost in the UK because of how we handled stress. Stress is stress, but it's what we do with the stress afterwards. So now it's clinically proven that meditation is this counter effect. It releases the opposite effect. It releases the opposite chemicals in the brain. So it is a counteractive measure to that remuneration, right? If we're just talking, never mind the actual application, how you do that, I'm talking just chemically. If you meditate, it reduces that remuneration. So kind of wild too, there was a simple solution, which is to get people to meditate. So how is this the case? And let me just talk about this a little bit. In mindfulness, there's an idea that there is nothing to fight against. Nothing to fight against. But there's nothing to do. It's relaxing into the stress. You're letting it sit and then learning to let it go and move on. Can you believe that it is about being open and compassionate to yourself and others when things get rough? It's about being open, right? It seems anti-intuitive because when things get rough, we want to get tense. We want to think about it. We want to figure it out. But I'm telling you that the solution is to just let it go. And it's not, I can't just say that to just let it go, but there's a process to learn about how to let it go. And it starts with understanding that we don't need to fight things. And we'll talk a bit about how to let things go. And I will delve into that a little bit later here. So I hope it's clear here, the strength of meditation and how it's about empowerment. How else does this look like in our work environment and as us as leaders? Now, what on earth could this be about? What on earth are these guys connected to that I'm talking about? How is this about meditation? How is this about leadership? These guys are looking like they're having lots of fun, and it looks very disconnected to what I'm talking about. But I 100% bet you, 100% bet you that your best leadership moments, you're 100% present. And I bet you 100% that your favorite things you love to do, like ride roller coasters, whatever that might be, jogging, hanging out with friends, the thing you say, I love to do this thing, this is the type of person I am, I love this thing, hiking, whatever it is, shopping, whatever it might be, it makes you present. It puts you in the space of the now. And in that space, you're not thinking about the past or the future. You think this guy here, he's sitting there thinking about the next job promotion he can get, and she's thinking about the next job promotion that she can get, right? No, these people are immersed in their present moment. And that's the joy they're getting out of the roller coaster, is that they're not thinking about the rest of everything else. They're focused in on the present. So now think about this. Meditation is bringing awareness to our awareness. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions. Were you aware of the mileage of your car when you last got out of it? How about the person that served you last? Maybe coffee, or maybe at a restaurant. Do you remember what they looked like? Do you remember their haircut? I'm assuming you looked at them. You had to have looked at this person. Do you remember what they look like? And without thinking about it right now, can you label what emotion you have? What was your first thought when you got up yesterday? Right? All of these things, you were there. I'm assuming you were there for all these things. But were you really there? Right? This is called absent-mindedness. And let me make a point here. By no means am I trying to tell you that at all times throughout the day, you should be immersed with putting yourself in the present. Sometimes we need to think about important things. That's our life, right? Especially as leaders, we need to think about things. But I'm trying to make the point that we might be relying on absent-mindedness a little bit too much, especially as I show you your best moments are when you're present, right? Your best moments are when you're present, and we immerse ourselves in absent-mindedness. So this is about awareness that we are on an autopilot, right? We're living throughout our autopilot life sometimes, especially when we're dealing with a demand-heavy lifestyle like leadership. And again, it's that kind of juxtaposition. Here I am telling you the emotional needs are super important. I'm telling you that we live almost unconscious. 95% of our brain activity is unconscious. Here we do live in absent-mindedness, yet your best times are when you're present. So isn't it clear there's a huge disconnect between the leader's need to understand and create a balance, or create a tool, use a tool that puts them in the present and makes them the best that they can be? Wouldn't a company want to embrace that? Wouldn't a institution or organization want to consider ways to make their leaders the best that they could possibly be? Right? I hope that disconnect is clear there, because I see that disconnect clearly, and I want to share that with you. Mindfulness allows people to become clear about what is happening in the mind on a moment-by-moment basis. And it's about inquiring into that mind frame. Do you have now, like that mind frame that you have as you approach your employee or the report or the task? What's the paradigm? What's the state of mind you're coming from? And are you aware of the state of mind? Are you clear about how you're approaching the task that you're going to approach? This is called leadership presence. And it's about bringing out the benefits of you and of the others around you and your employees. Okay, so this is lastly to this. This is the global connection I've been trying to help you make about the benefits of meditating in the work environment. So I've talked about compassion and empathy and accepting and being open to challenges and coming from the present moment. All this is called cultivating mindful presence. And when you're cultivating mindful presence, you'll begin to see where you have choices and where you're kind of falling into habits and behaviors that are counterproductive, especially as a leader, right? It's actually about being aware about where we're falling into habits that are counterproductive for us in that leadership role. It's about knowing and becoming aware of the habits that hold you back, inquiring into our mindset, as I mentioned before. And lastly, and importantly, it's about knowing who you are, why you're here, and where you are going from here, personally, holistically, and as a leader. So I have a teacher, I have my meditation teacher, and he puts it, knowing these three things, this is your happiness quotient. Okay, so let me give you some tools. Just taking a quick glance at where we are. I think we're in good time here. So I want to give you some things that you can take with yourself and things that we can maybe apply to the work environment. Now, important to understand is that meditation is a process. I've talked really highly about the benefits here, and I have experienced those benefits personally myself, and I have witnessed them for people who have taken meditation on when I was training meditation. But by no means am I saying that you're going to go home tonight and you go meditate and you're going to come back as a different person tomorrow. And I would hope to believe that you understand that. But it does take some time and it does take some commitment, because it's an observation of yourself. Right? It's a dedication to observing yourself and to being with yourself. There are two qualities to this observer self that I want to talk about. Observer self is this. It's the kind of control mechanism below us. And when I do my workshop, I try to get you to become familiar with this observer self. And so I'll give you some quick things that I do here in a workshop that I contain. The first quality of the inner observer is the recognition that your thoughts are just thoughts. That your thoughts are not you. Kind of neat, eh? Your thoughts are not you. They're just thoughts. So you want to let go of your thoughts. A way that I help people do this, I delve deeper into it in my workshop, but put yourself on the side of the stream, be in a forest, put yourself on the side of the stream, be sitting there, watch the stream go down, see the water go down the stream. Just dump your thoughts in it. Whatever the thoughts you're having, You might be thinking about what you have to do for the rest of the day today. That might be there for you. Just dump that thought into the stream and let it go down. And when you do that, there's a tinge. You feel that tinge. Maybe there's a sense of small relaxation that occurs. That's your observer self. It's part of you that you're identifying with yourself, separate from your thinking. Because we are not our thoughts. Our thoughts are not us. They're just thoughts. The second quality is recognizing our stories. We have a past background data about practically everything. When I got you earlier to look at, an object in your space. Now I mentioned briefly, try to have no judgment about it. But really, what's the problem with our awareness is that it's layered with stories. Maybe you looked at the couch or a glass. I was looking at a glass here, so I'll use that as an example. So maybe this glass, right? Well, my wife bought that glass, and I didn't really like that glass. And that thought could have infiltrated my observation of it. So I stopped looking at it purely as just observation, and I had some thought background story about the glass. It's just a glass, but I've got a story about it. My wife bought that glass, and I don't really like that glass. Now, the truth is that's not the case. But right, we layer storytelling on everything. We don't observe phenomena as just phenomena. Right? Think about it this way. The labels that we place on things, glass. Actually, the glass is not a glass, right? That's my English language label for a glass. But it is not glass. It is my label for it. And my label for it changes how I perceive it. It actually isn't a glass. It's just a thing that holds liquid that helps me, right? The liquid water helps me. But it is just a phenomenon. It is an object. And so removing that story, that background story, so we begin to see phenomena as phenomena. Our awareness is trapped in this. And we don't just do this for our external things around us. We do it internally as well, too. So I'll give you an example. You're a leader in your work environment, and you have an employee, and your employee says something snippy to you. And you get brushed off by it. It was actually almost offensive to you, and it hurts you. And first and foremost, you have a story about her. I can't believe she did that. Oh my God, what was she thinking? So there you go. You have a story. What was she thinking? She's a story. You have a story about her. You're assuming she's just maybe irrational. You don't know her dog just died, right? So you've created a story there about the interaction. Next to that, you got hurt, and you have a story about that hurt. Oh, I can't believe I got hurt. Only wusses get hurt, right? So you have layers of stories that sit in our psyche and in our awareness. And so to get connected to the observer self, we're seeing and observing those stories. We're becoming aware of what that story is, and we're letting it go. It's about observing and let it go. There's a story. Let it go. And be curious. Be curious about the story. Where did the story come from? Why do I think that way? Why am I built this way? Why do I have that thinking? All of our stress, pain, and fears are governed by these stories. The inner observer is making a choice about these stories. You literally make a choice about those stories. That inner observer who decided that they didn't want to get hurt, that only wusses get hurt, that inner observer says, okay, I have a past, my dad used to tell me only wusses get hurt. So I'm going to go back to that memory. And the fact is, inside of us, it's so quick because we built the response up so fast, we forgot that there was a choice involved in how we think about what we think about. And when you come to mindfulness and you come to awareness, the stuff comes up because you become to come from the observer self, and you watch the choices you're making as you make those choices. And then you kind of need to think about, like, why do I have that choice? And this happens in leadership when we apply it, and it helps us overall, globally, holistically. One point is just to make, this is not about being passive to getting hurt. It is about acknowledging being hurt, right? I just want to make a clarity. It's not about being passive to anything. By no means, actually, he should, understanding how he, in that moment, that example I gave you, it would be about understanding how it affected you, and then creating a proper communication dialogue with the employee. And, a communication dialogue where you still trust the employee but not understand why they talk to you this way, right? So that's something else, but just want to make that clear that I'm not talking about being passive to Hertz here. Okay, so I'm going to show you some things that you can use for your own meditation if you do meditate already, or maybe you're going to consider meditating at home, or things that you can take with you to the work environment. So this, we're going to talk a bit about breath. I think I just want to emphasize here that the real stuff versus the stuff that's, I've seen a lot of stuff online, and here's the tips I give you. Either come from someone who's formally trained, listen to someone who's formally trained, or listen to someone who has the authentic teacher. So I have an authentic teacher. My teacher's name is Tolshi Sen. He's written a book called Ancient Secrets of Success. And he comes from a lineage of teachers that spans 1,000 or so years back. It's the real authentic stuff. And because I'm seeing so much online, and I'm seeing so much people talk about this stuff, and here's the tips. You can know that it's authentic if they delve into breath, awareness, and focus, or one of those three, into detail. Because those three things seem really simple, but it's making an art of them. That's really what meditation is about here. It's about making an art of breath, awareness, and focus. So we want to take on breath and use it for ourselves. There's three components here, and this is the basis that we need this stuff to make sure our meditation is effective. We want to have a straight back and breathe from our nose. No matter what anybody tells you, only breathe from your nose. I actually have an article on my Twitter account that delves into the importance of breath from nose. And we want to breathe into our belly. Now you should feel the change, having a straight back, breathing from the nose, breathing into your belly. This is one of the calming agents. This is the beginning calming agent of mindfulness. Even just taking this to your work environment or taking this to your meditation. And I want to emphasize something here about the breath. So you don't need to model this pendulum here, but notice the pause. It gets to the top, it pauses. And this is the deflation of the breath. It pauses. We want our breath to have the pauses in the belly, and then as you deflate. Breathing into the nose, in from the nose, breathing into the belly. And I think I'm actually running out of time, so I do apologize. Breath. So these are the three components of breath. Please retain these. Straight back, breathe from your nose, breathe into your belly. Never through your mouth, never with your chest. Specifically for meditation I'm talking about, and specifically meditation or in the work environment when you're looking for a calming agent. And then I won't go over these, but this is the component. You don't need to memorize this, but awareness, we want to focus in on an object. Be open to that object, have acceptance, use curiosity and beginner's mind. So whatever, that glass that I was looking at. Openness is not having any prior past judgment or ideas about it. And focus in on it. Zero in on that object. And as you do that, you can feel the presence. It puts you in the present moment. You can retain that for a minute. Breathing the way I just showed you, become aware of an object. And so here's my takeaway for you. Use your smartphone. Program twice a day a reminder to use these calming tools in the middle of your hectic day and just see what happens. Breath and awareness. You can literally, if you don't know how do you program a reminder in your phone can do it by voice. You can say, hey Siri. If I say, hey Siri, it will respond. My phone here will. But hey Siri, remind me to, my phone responded, remind me to breathe and be aware at 10:30 and at 3:30. Right in the middle of your hectic day, have a reminder and see what happens. And you'll notice a change will happen. You'll become calm, and you'll have a little bit more awareness. You'll gain a perspective of awareness about your thinking and about your emotions. Small takeaway. So, that's my phone responding. So small takeaway. So thank you so much. That's the end of my webinar. Thank you so much for coming. And just to mention here as well too, what I offer is a full workshop of mindfulness and meditation for 3 hours. And also I offer a full day workshop where I involve creative thinking, problem solving, tied into meditation, because a lot of people don't know as a solution for problem solving using meditation. So thank you. So Kevin, you there?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Prem. I learned a lot from that session, and certainly I'm breathing a lot more deeply into my gut, into my belly, and sitting up straight with better posture and trying to take advantage of that as we go. Thank you so much.
Great.
Okay, now for those who have questions, there's a number of you on the line. If you have any particular questions, please type them into the questions window on the interface. In addition, I will be reading those out, and you can then respond as necessary. Now, somebody did raise their virtual hand as well. What we're going to do is ask you to type your question into the question window, and we'll deal with those. Okay, so there's a question from Sai. He says, is it possible that meditation leads to softening of the thalamus, distance from identity, hence less association with the subjective memories, past, and expectations, future, hence mind has only one way to go, in the present, therefore better performance? Both past and future are subjective to individual identity. It is possibly easier to build a team as well when you are a little less attached to your identity or ego self.
Great. Okay, yes, great question. And, I would agree with that. I think I can't speak directly about the thalamus's role in present or future identity, about how the thalamus kind of retains that about present or future identity. But yes, right, because your higher performance is happening in the present moment, and you're fully absorbed. As I've talked earlier, that your favorite things are when you're fully present. The things you love to do is when you're fully present, and your highest performance, the best performance you've ever done. You weren't sitting there thinking about the past when you were absorbed in your high performance, right? Exactly, Sai, you're totally correct, is that it's about present moment. Performance is intertwined. Now, I can't specifically say that the thalamus is interacting in a way with the past or present thinking, but I would tell you that, yes, reduction of that past or present thinking definitely helps with the higher performance. And when it comes to team building, I would say that, yeah, you're kind of just nailing it on the head, right? When it comes to team building, our best ability to build the teams is when we're emotionally connecting to our team members. And yes, we're doing that in present moment awareness. And we're going to build those connections stronger when we're reducing that past thinking or that future thinking, and we're kind of just bonding in present thinking. So yes, I totally agree with all that.
Excellent. Prem, we had another question come up. How do you control negative thinking?
Yes. Great question. And so negative thinking, what I would say about negative thinking is you need a trigger, right? If you can create in actually a workshop format, I do this because people really they don't like their negative thinking. They get freaked out about negative thinking, but not freaked out, but they don't like it, and they want to be able to control it. And I recommend creating a positive image, right? The image of the thing, an idealized, maybe beautiful image, top of the mountain, you on the top of the mountain, a rose or a flower, something that is just beautiful and a powerful image. So whenever you have that negative image, you avoid it by replacing it with the positive image. And you will find that the more you do that, I mentioned earlier, your brain rewires itself to think positively. That's exactly what happens. Every time you interrupt that negative thought with a positive thought, you're rewiring the brain to resist the negative thinking.
Excellent. Thank you very much. There is one final question here. We're running out of time, so we'll just have this time for this one last question. What are some ways that I can implement mindfulness in the workplace?
Right. Mindfulness in the workplace. So what I recommend is the tip that I gave you. That's one of them. And, as leaders, we're in charge of the culture. The culture is something that, as I mentioned, there's an emotional connection there. So we're in charge of that culture, and we're resonating the culture downwards for our team. So your choice to talk about things like compassion and empathy and those words. I used to be very conscious of this. The words I'm using in my culture affect my culture. So when I started talking about vision, high performance, and mission, then those became the words my team started using. So it's kind of talking like that. It's having a conversation or bringing up those words in the way that in the culture, so you slightly start infiltrating it, whether it be openness, acceptance, compassion, whatever way that you want to infiltrate those mindfulness techniques, especially maybe the one that I even brought up. You can bring those in kind of ever so slightly into the work environment and kind of see what happens from there.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time, Prem. For those of you on this call who need professional development credits for attending this session, we will be sending out a post-call email with information on how to claim those credits. So expect an email from us with that information. Thank you very much for attending. This is part of a monthly series of webinars. We run them roughly one per month. We've been doing that for a while, and we plan to continue through the rest of the year. So keep an eye out for those additional events that you can take advantage of. For more information on our future upcoming events, please go to www.procept.com. That's www.procept.com, and look in our events calendar. Thank you very much, Prem.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Bye-bye.